The concept of Teshuva, according to the Arizal, as it's presented from two sources, namely Shara Gilgulim, Akdama Kaf Aleph, and Tav Kuf Nun Likutim, Simin Tav Kuf Beis. Each of these two sources has nuances and details that are not in the other, so it's nice to meld them together to get a full picture of the ideas. The general concept of Teshuva, the way the Arizal describes it, is Tashuv Hey, to return the Hey, and as mentioned in Tanya, if you're familiar. But the Arizal goes much deeper than just that basic idea of it, the way it's mentioned in Tanya, even though Tanya is describing it in a different context, so you can't really compare. But the way the Arizal describes it is like this. Man is composed of all four worlds. Even if somebody lives on the lowest level of Nefesh, they're still ready to receive all of the supernal levels. They have it all in potential within them. The idea then is that since a person is composed of 248 limbs and 365 sinews, when you sin and you blemish a particular limb, associated limb, and depending on how high your soul is, you're going to blemish that spiritual level in potential. Because again, you have all the worlds in potential in you. And if your soul is higher, you're going to blemish that higher level. So that's how high it would reach. So if you're on the lowest level, the world of Acía, it only blemishes on that level. If you're on a higher level, the blemish will reach the higher spiritual realm. So the world of Acía, it blemishes Acía. The Yitzira, it could blemish up to Yitzira, to Bria, to Atzilus. This is the meaning of the verse, Yotze Ruach Ha'adam Bikirbo, that Hashem, He forms the spirit of man inside of him, meaning that after it's already inside of you, He's still forming it. The soul still develops, and grows, and ascends to higher levels, even after the soul's initial entry into you. It's for this reason that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was worried about his sins to the point where, before he passed away, he wasn't sure which direction he was going. He wasn't sure if he was going to the path of Gan Eden or Gehenna. And why is that? Because he was so great. So any blemish he caused was going to have a greater effect, since it blemished even the higher realms. The klippa is compared to a monkey that tries to copy a man, kekuf bifnei adam, since it wants to copy the holiness. Just as there are 7 hecholos, 7 palaces of holiness, there are 7 palaces of klippa. Therefore, when a person sins, depending on the level of holiness in the person's soul, that's how high the blemish reaches oppositely in klippa too. You can enter into the palaces of klippa. So too, when a person does tshuva, that is how high the level of tshuva reaches as well in the palaces of holiness. So, describing the different levels of tshuva, depending on the sin and the level of the soul of the person who transgressed. So, if you blemished on the world on the level of the world of Acía, then the tshuva corrects the blemish of Acía. And that's the lowest level of the Dalit Chaluki Kapara we're going to mention in a little bit. If you transgress if you transgress a positive commandment and do tshuva, lo zaz misham ad shemochlin lo, and once you do tshuva, you don't move from there until you're forgiven. Meaning to say, it's immediate. That since the blemish you created is on the lowest level, which is a separation of malchus downwards, no movement or elevation is necessary to fix it. Rather, it comes right back up, right to where it was before. And just as the sin affects and correlates to the four worlds, so too it correlates to Hashem's name. Depending on the level of sin, that's the letter of Hashem's name that needs rectification. This is the meaning of the verse, Yatsu v'ra'u b'figrei ha'anashim haposhim bi. You'll go out and see the bodies of the people who have sinned against me. That's the simple translation. But haposhim bi, that sinned in me, literally is translated as those who have sinned within me, myself, meaning to say, my name, bishmi. They've blemished my name, they've sinned in me. Therefore, the Yud of Hashem's name and Shem Av corresponds to the world of Atzilus. The K of Hashem's name, the first K, corresponds to Shem Sag and the world of Bria. The Vav corresponds to Shem Man, the world of Yitzira. And the last K corresponds to Shem Ban and the world of Asiyah. Depending on the sin, sometimes the world of Asiyah, now let's say this is on the level of Asiyah, which is the first of the Chaluki Kapara. You do a sin and this will descend down into the first three levels of Klippa. It's meaning to say it doesn't go all the way down into Klippa, it just skims the top, the Chabad of Klippa, so to speak. And then when you do Teshuva, it comes right back up. And since these three levels of Klippa themselves can be rectified, as is known, the concept of the Klippas Noga, and this is hinted to in the concept of what's brought in the Gemara, that it says the Yarden can transfer a person's property from one side to the other. So the Yarden transfers property, can transfer also from holiness to Klippa or vice versa. And this is the concept we see by the Yarden, that the Torah, the stones were taken from the Yarden, and the Torah was written on them, so to speak, transferring to the holiness. It's the concept of the three cities of refuge that were on the other side of the Jordan. And the other side of the Jordan is outside of Israel. So the Yarden is so to speak divides between the Kedusha and the Klippa, between that which can be elevated and cannot be elevated. You take three cities, so to speak, the Chabad of the Klippa, you elevate it to make it a miklat that you can elevate them to holiness as well. On the other side of the Jordan, on which is a concept of transferring to the holiness. And in turn, when you're going down in when you have the cities of refuge as they are in Israel, so this concept is, because the cities of refuge are for murder, so it's a sort of a descent. You go to the city of refuge, you yourself are descending. So if you're going outside of Israel, it's going into the Klippa, from the world of Asiyah to the Klippa. But if you're on a higher level, the world of Yitzira, let's say, then it's going into the world of Asiyah, which is within holiness itself, and those are the cities of refuge for sin within the holiness itself, so to speak, depending on where that sin blemished. If the sin was, so to speak, reached up to the world of Yitzira, or was on the level, a more edel sin, depending on what it was, a lighter type of sin. And so this concept of the lower world of the Klippas outside of Israel, it's also the concept of the exile of the Shekhinah, and depending on the world, that's where the Shekhinah is exiled to, so to speak. So into the Klippos is the exile of Shekhinah from Asiyah, into the world of Asiyah from Yitzira is also a concept of the exile of the Shekhinah on a higher level, and from Bria to Yitzira is also an exile of the Shekhinah of Bria. And similarly, the Malchus of Atzilus, or the Shekhinah, as it comes down from Atzilus into Bria, and so forth, it's an exile of Shekhinah on that level. Now, just as we've described how there can be a descent into the first three levels of Klippa, there can also be a descent into the middle levels of Klippa. The chagas of Klippa, or it depending on the sin, it can go down even further to the nihi of Klippa. How deep did the sin go down? Or even to the lowest level of Klippa, the, so to speak, malchus of Klippa. This is all dependent on the depth and the type of sin that caused this. And just as there is this idea of the concept of the upper, middle, and lower levels in the world of Asiyah, the same will apply to the different worlds of Atzilus, Bri, Yetzira, and the descent on those higher levels, or where it affects those higher levels. The way it works is, if you only separate Malchus from Tiferes, so you're only separating the last K of Hashem's name from its source. And so then it only goes down to the first three levels of Klippa. However, if you separate the Tiferes itself from Bina, it goes down even further. The descent is into the three middle levels. And that's the level that corresponds with Tiferes. With Tiferes is the concept of the Midos. So the descent goes down to the Midos, so to speak, of Klippa. The Teshuva in this case is then to return to the higher K, the concept of Bina, to go up to the higher level, Teshuv He of Bina, instead of the Teshuv He of Malchus. And that is, you also return the K of Malchus in the process, which is the husband. The Tiferes is the husband of the He, and so it goes upwards. Both of them together, the Chassid and the Kala, the Vav and the K of Hashem's name, go upwards, back up to the K of Bina. Another possibility is that the division is where the sin is within Tiferes itself, or alternatively, the blemish here is reaching to Bina. And Bina, therefore, descends to Malchus and unites with it. So Bina is going down here. In this, it descends to the lower three levels of Klippa, the Nihi, because it's reached all the way up to the level of Bina, and both. You have the blemish both in the Vav and the K, not just the K and not just the Vav, but both of them are descending because the Bina has descended now, because the blemish has reached to that level, and that's why it's gone down all the way to the Nihi of Klippa. So when you do Teshuva, you're returning not just the K and the Vav, but also the higher K, the Bina, back up to its source, because the Bina and the Malchus have become one. Bina is the concept of the K, and Malchus is the concept of the K. And when they unite together, it's also Tashuv K, Teshuva, returning the He of Hashem's name as one. They return as one K in this context. Yet another possibility is that the sin affects all the way to the level of Chokhmah and divides between it and Keser, causing its descent as well to the levels below it. Meaning to say, Chokhmah descends all the way down. And all the levels below it, the Yud and the K and the Vav and the K have all descended. In this case, what you do, what the Teshuva is to return the K back, the Bina back up to Keser. And that will carry the Chokhmah back along with it. It's still a concept of Tashuv K. You're still returning the Hey. Teshuva is still returning Hey, even though it's on the level of Chokhmah, even though it's on the, so to speak, it's reached the level of the Yud, because you're returning Bina. Bina is the concept of the Teshuva, returns it back up to Keser. Now, all these 4 levels of Teshuva are, if they're still only on the level of Acía, it only applies to the transgression of positive commandments. It's still only the first of the 4 categories of atonement. The first of the Dalet Chalukei Kapara, when you're overall mitzvah saseh. So the Teshuva is all on the level of the Hey of the Hey Tata, the lower Hey as well. Now these 4 categories of atonement, each of the 4 levels is a different elevation of Hashem's name back up to its source. We've already described how it works in the first category, when a person transgresses a positive commandment, and you can go down into the klipa in 4 different ways. So, but that's still all on the level of the K of Hashem's name. All of those 4 levels is still within the concept of the world of Acía, which corresponds with a Hey. When a person transgresses a negative commandment, that's the second of the 4 Chalukei Kapara, then the Teshuva hangs in the balance, and Yom Kippur atones. In this, they've blemished the level of the world of Yitzira and the concept of Tiferes. And it's now the Vav of the Hashem's name that goes upwards in a way, instead of the K of Hashem's name. We need to bring back that level of Hashem's name, the Vav. So in this case, when you do Teshuva, the K can ascend, but the Vav cannot ascend, because you've blemished the Vav and not the K. So you must wait for Yom Kippur, when the light shines down from the world of Bria, because if you've blemished in Yitzira, you need a tikkun, you need from Bria. And that's the concept of the Teshuva hanging in the balance. And Yom Kippur atones. Yom Kippur, Yud K is Yom Kippur. Yom HaKippurim is Yud K. That's the level of Bina needs to shine down to atone for the Histalkus Havov, which is the concept of the negative commandments reaching a higher, the blemish reaching a higher world. Again, in 4 different ways, depending on how you do that sin, it can send down into, you can lower the levels down into the world of Acía, either the first 3 levels, or the middle levels, or the lowest level. You've descended the level of Yitzira, you've brought it down into Acía because of the sin. You've lowered the levels. And the third of the Chalukei Kapara is when a person transgresses a sin where they're chayiv kares, krisos. That blemish reaches up to the world of Bria. In this case, both the K and the Vav can't be elevated. So both Teshuva and Yom Kippur are hanging in the balance, tluim, and unyusurim gomrim makapara. The difficulties, going through difficulties, purges the sin. This is the meaning of the verse Yasur Yisrani Ka. Yud K has these levels of Yisurim are coming from Yud K. Why? Because that's where the blemishes reach. That's where the blemishes are purged from the level of Bina of Yud K. And in the end of this pasuk, Ulemavis lo nesanani, didn't give me to death. That hints to the 4th category of atonement. The Dalid. The Chalukah Dalit of the Dalit Chalukei Kapara. That when a person transgresses a Chilul Hashem, they've transgressed the entire name of Hashem, not just the K, and not just the Vav, and not just the higher K, but even the Yud has gone upwards. Even the world of Atzilus, the blemish reaches all the way, even up to there. Atzilus is the Makom HaNitzchius. It's a place of, so to speak, living forever. The concept of the tree of life. Is the concept of there's no death in the world of Atzilus, and of course corresponds with Chachma. As we know, there's the pasuk Yamusu v'lo b'Chachma. There's death without wisdom. For this reason, all the 3 other types of atonements, including the Yisurim, are all tluim. They can't get their atonement yet. And so the K and the Vav and the K hang in the balance, and only death completes the atonement, because that's the level of the sin. That's how far it's reached up. A further way to divide the concept of sin is just in general, whether or not the sin was lahachis or leteavon. Was it to anger Hashem, or was it only for your own benefit and pleasure? When it's lahachis, so you've given over the entire flow over to the klippa. So that's the concept of pesha. The different words for sin mean different things. The word pesha means rebellion, Elohim murdim, and it's the same letters as the word shefa, flow. Why? Because you're giving a flow. You've given a complete flow to the klippa. It's the concept again of the exile of the Shekhinah, completely given it over to the klippa. It's descended completely. However, if, for example, you eat nevela l'te'avon, you've eaten non-kosher meat for the sake of your own pleasure, you've given some to the other side, but you've kept some for yourself. So it hasn't gone completely to the klippa. So here is the difference whether or not when you do tshuva, if you've done it l'te'avon, then if it's for your own pleasure, then you can get back everything, because you've only given a portion of it to the klippa. So you can take it all back, but so you can change the zidonos to zachios. You can change the intentional sins to merits. Why? Because it's easier to get it up. However, if it was done lahachis, you can't bring it back all the way up. Therefore, your zidonos can become shkagos, can become unintentional sins, but it can't come all the way up because of the amount that, so to speak, that was given. A final distinction, and in an addendum that's only brought in the Tavkuf Likutim, is the effect on the four different worlds on bittul Torah, when you neglect Torah study or don't want to study it in some way. The Torah study that's on the level is on the level of tiferes of each world, respectively. If a person is not interested or neglects the pshat, the simple meaning, they blemish tiferes of Asiyah. If they're not interested to bring a raya, a proof, they blemish tiferes of Yitzirah. Now we know that the four levels in Torah correspond with the Rashi Tevos of Pardes. Usually it's Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. Here, he actually says it in a different way. It would be Pshat, Raya, Drush, and Sod. That you bring a proof for something, that's the second level. So that's the world of Yitzirah. If you've blemished, if you've neglected the Drash, you've blemished the level of the world of Bria. And if you've blemished that's the Tiferes of Bria. And if you've blemished the secrets, it reaches up all the way to Tiferes of Atzilus. That's where that sin reaches, and that's where the Teshuva for that will reach as well. Now somebody who plumbs the depth of all of these levels, they merit all the great levels. May Hashem do this for those who hope in Him.